All right, let's dive straight into this explainer. February 21st, 1916. Picture this: 1,000 German guns opening fire on French positions all at once. That barrage kicked off a 300-day nightmare that literally changed military strategy forever. Today, we're unpacking a battle immortalized for its sheer horror, but as you'll see, it's also this incredibly dramatic story of emerging technologies, shifting doctrines, and, frankly, unimaginable human endurance. 1,000 lives, every single day. That's the incomprehensible scale we're dealing with here. For nearly 300 days, this battle consumed 1,000 men daily. We aren't just talking about a traditional clash of armies anymore. This was an industrial-scale slaughterhouse that completely redefined what a modern battlefield looked like.
Phase 1. The grim logic of attrition.
So, why Verdun? Well, to really get it, we need to look at the German commander, General Falkenhayn. He completely threw the traditional military playbook out the window. His goal wasn't actually to capture a city or break through the lines to advance. No, it was something far darker. Verdun was explicitly designed to be a giant meat grinder. It was the ultimate test of this brutal theory of attrition, basically bleeding an enemy white. The logic is as simple as it is terrifying. Kill the enemy faster than you lose your own men, and eventually, you'll completely crush their will to fight. Falkenhayn later claimed this horrifying arithmetic was his master plan all along.
Phase 2. The artillery war. Fast forward to April 1916, and both sides are just desperately scrapping for every single inch of high ground so they could direct their heavy guns. Because artillery, that was the absolute biggest killer here. It's estimated that a staggering 100 million high-explosive and shrapnel shells rained down by the time the battle ended. To put that completely mind-boggling number into perspective, up to 37 million shells were fired in just the first 6 months. Soldiers rarely even saw the enemy. They were simply obliterated from miles away. And just think about the hardware doing all this destruction. On the German side, you've got this massive mobile monster known as Big Bertha. We're talking 43 metric tons with a 16-foot barrel, firing shells that weighed over a ton and could literally smash through 40 feet of solid concrete. But it needed 240 men just to operate it, and it could only manage about 8 shells an hour. Now contrast that with the French. They brought out the vintage de Bong 15.5mm cannon. Sure, it was dwarfed in size and actually dated back to the 1870s, but what it lacked in sheer bulk, it made up for with a range of nearly 8 miles and a highly accurate firing rate of 1 shell per minute. Specialized 5-man French crews used these incredibly effectively to hunt down and knock out German artillery.
Moving on to Phase 3. Logistics and endurance.
Imagine trying to survive when the actual trenches have been completely flattened by all that shelling. Men were forced to shelter in these flooded craters, linking them together to form makeshift lines. The conditions were just nightmarish. Streams were poisoned, village wells were destroyed, sickness was everywhere, and guys were literally living right alongside human remains. To prevent total psychological and physical collapse, the French army, led by General Pétain, set up the Noria system, basically a water wheel rotation policy. Instead of leaving units on the front line until they were just ground down to nothing, like the Germans were doing, Pétain constantly cycled French units out for rest. Because of this brilliant move, roughly 3/4 of the entire French army eventually cycled through the Verdun meat grinder. But, rotating that many troops requires logistics on a scale that's hard to even wrap your head around. The absolute lifeline for France was this main supply route from the south, called the Voie Sacrée, or the Sacred Way. It was essentially a relentless conveyor belt. Every single day, up to 15,000 tons of supplies and 15,000 fresh troops rolled up that road. Army trucks ran day and night, passing by every few seconds. If a truck broke down, no time to fix it, it was shoved right off the road into the ditch to keep the artery flowing, while a crew of 10,000 laborers worked around the clock, just throwing rocks down to maintain the road surface.
Phase 4. Escalation and the turning point.
By May, Falkenhayn was really starting to sweat over his own mounting losses, which had already passed 100,000 men. The early summer was just this chaotic, bloody back and forth. You had horrific accidents, like a massive ammunition fire inside Fort Douaumont that killed nearly 700 German soldiers. Meanwhile, Pétain gets promoted, and the French defense is handed to General Robert Nivelle, a guy completely full of that famous French offensive spirit. Well, Nivelle orders this disastrous attempt to retake Fort Douaumont in May. It fails miserably, causing nearly 50% casualties for the attacking division and leaving 1,000 men captured. Emboldened by that, the Germans push hard. By early June, they hit Fort Vaux. 500 French defenders are trapped down in the tunnels, enduring terrifying gas and flamethrower attacks in pitch blackness. After 5 days with literally zero water left, they had no choice but to surrender. By late June, the situation is looking completely dire. The Germans zeroed in on the ridge leading to Souville, which was pretty much the last observation point before Verdun itself. They hammered the sector with 100,000 gas shells, using these deadly new phosgene and diphosgene compounds. French gas masks could barely handle it. Artillery crews choked, and their guns just stopped firing. The Germans pushed within 4 miles of Verdun. Villages like Fleury changed hands 16 different times. And it was right here, at the absolute brink, that General Nivelle issued his legendary message to his men, Ils ne passeront pas. They shall not pass. Now, in the middle of all this mechanized, industrial-scale slaughter, there's this incredible little pocket of humanity. When Fort Vaux was being completely overrun, the trapped defenders relied on a French carrier pigeon named La Valente. This brave little bird flew through the artillery barrages to deliver a desperate plea for reinforcements. Sadly, La Valente didn't survive the aftermath of his mission, but he was posthumously awarded the Croix de Guerre for exceptional bravery. It's a pretty striking reminder of just how critical secure communication was, even if it meant relying on the wings of a bird. Finally, the unbearable intensity starts to break in the summer. In July, the focus of the entire Western Front abruptly shifts northwest to the River Somme, where the British and French kick off a massive offensive. This was deliberately timed to draw German troops away and take the heat off Verdun. As the criticism of Falkenhayn reached a boiling point, he was ousted in August, replaced by Field Marshal von Hindenburg, who immediately hit the brakes on all further German attacks at Verdun. Phase 5. France fights back. So the immediate German threat had eased, but General Nivelle? Oh, he wasn't finished. Brimming with confidence, he saw this as a matter of pure national honor. In October of 1916, he launched a colossal counteroffensive to retake those lost forts. The French unleashed a staggering 650 guns on the German lines. The star players in this arsenal were 2 absolutely massive 400mm railguns nicknamed Alsace and Lorraine after the territories France lost to Germany back in 1871. These behemoths smashed right into Fort Douaumont, collapsing tunnels, igniting ammunition stores, and totally paving the way for specialized French and Senegalese colonial infantry to storm the German lines. You know, if you really want to grasp the sheer destructive power unleashed over those 10 months, aerial reconnaissance tells the whole story. Before the battle, Fort Douaumont was this massive, formidable concrete structure. By the time it was recaptured, it was essentially erased. It was nothing more than a faint, chalky outline floating in a moonscape of overlapping shell craters and blasted trenches. The fort, the surrounding villages, they were literally wiped off the face of the earth. And finally, Phase 6, the cost and legacy. By December 15th, the last major French offensive pushed the Germans back. And here's the crazy part. After 10 solid months of unimaginable horror, the front lines were almost exactly where they had started way back in February. It was a total strategic failure for Germany. Falkenhayn's grand plan to break the French morale had completely flopped. And the human cost, well, the numbers are just terrifying. While exact figures are still debated, estimates put French casualties around 377,000, with over 40% of those killed. German losses were slightly lower, but still absolutely massive, with a final death toll hovering around 300,000 men. Ironically, it was the Allied strategy of attrition across Verdun and the Somme that actually eroded Germany's ability to fight, exhausting their resources right as the United States was getting ready to enter the war. For France, Verdun became this deeply symbolic victory, a testament to the ultimate sacrifice of the poilu, the everyday French soldier. Today, if you visit the battlefield, you'll find the Douaumont ossuary standing there. It holds the remains of 130,000 unidentified French and German soldiers. It serves not just as a memorial to the utter madness of the First World War, but as this incredibly powerful symbol of reconciliation and shared history between France and Germany today. And that leaves us with a lingering question. After the war, a huge chunk of this battlefield was designated the Zone Rouge, the Red Zone. The land was so saturated with unexploded shells, toxic chemical residue, and human remains that farming or living there was deemed totally impossible. The land was just abandoned. Even today, over a century later, strict restrictions are still in force, and scientists are still out there studying the war's long ecological legacy. So it really forces us to ask, long after the armies retreat and the peace treaties are signed, how deep do the scars of our conflicts truly go?